So Richard, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me on the interview. It's an absolute privilege. I grew up in Johannesburg originally, but I have moved around quite extensively in my life. I've lived in New Zealand, I've lived in Germany, I've lived in the UK, I've lived in the US, and I've really been, I'd say I'm a global citizen, but my roots and origins are very much Johannesburg.
And tell us, Richard, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So when I grew up, everyone laughed at me and everyone said it's impossible. And my dream career was to be part of and working with professional sportsmen. I didn't have the physical aptitude and abilities to make it at the top level. And I wanted to be in that world. And that was the aspiration. It was to somehow be part of this process of the facilitation of other people's potential and abilities. And that was the drive and the ambition and the focus of my entire life and career.
So can you tell us who inspired you in your early days?
Who inspired me? You know, it's a very interesting thing because a lot of the inspiration in the formative years was self-motivated. It was a lot of self-dialogue and really determination and grit that pushed me through. But once I started entering into the sports domain and I started working with some successful, it was actually in the world of tennis, successful tennis players, I met a particular coach, a very interesting individual who had a different vision, and he had worked with a lot of the top players. He was a former top player, and he was someone who just really made me believe in myself, and he pushed me to be better, and he helped me grow, and he really made me the best version within the context of what I was trying to achieve. And I'm eternally grateful to him. And the interesting thing is about 5 to 10 years later, I met another coach, or just at another level of the sport, who was working pretty much with only number ones in the world. And he did the same thing. He basically took the raw material and he nurtured it and guided it and facilitated the next generation of my set of abilities. And that really was the two big turning points in my career.
Now, Richard, you've been working with top athletes at the Olympics and global tours. Can you maybe share a couple of highlights from your career as a performance coach?
Highlights from my career, there's so, you know, I think when we go into an endeavor, we have a certain set of goals and objectives. And I think the first goal that I set for myself within the world of sport was to reach the pinnacle of South African sport. And the pinnacle of South African sport is working with Springbok Rugby or Springbok Rugby players, the captain and senior members. And that was the first aspiration. And I worked through a lot of different sports, from swimming to golf, and finally arrived at this amazing destination. And it was an incredibly rewarding and inspiring, fulfilling moment. But the minute that goal was achieved and attained, it was the next set of objectives, and that was really to take the next big milestone. And the next big milestone was to be at the Olympics, and preferably with a team that has the ability to win the Olympics or is a serious competitor, which means that we're looking at 3 or 4 teams. We look at the US, China, Russia, the UK. And that was the next aspiration. And I was fortunate in my career journey to work with the right people at the right level and be able to realize this vision, where I ended up taking on the role as athletic director for the Chinese Olympic team. And in that year, they won the Olympics. And that was really the pinnacle of everything I worked for from the age of 6 and 7. And it was an incredible feeling. It was difficult to recalibrate after that. I'm sure you've heard that many athletes really struggle following career achievements and accomplishments and where to go next. But what an incredible experience and learnings that came with it.
Now, Richard, looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point, or maybe a couple of turning points where things could have gone different?
Absolutely. Well, there was one particular instance, and I talked about it in my first book, The Stress Code, and it was a very successful athlete, probably a tennis player ranked around 4 in the world, and they were a big draw in terms of crowds and sponsorships and just the whole media circle and hype around them was extreme. They were a very popular individual, and part of the reason was that they were linked to a lot of celebrities. They were engaged to a famous actress, and they had just the A-list members of the kind of that community, the performing community at their matches, and it was great for the sport. It was just before the era of Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal, who were also big crowd draws. And what happened was this individual got into a little bit of experienced an issue, an injury setback. And with injuries, it's always multifactorial. It's not just limited to I've got this injury and I can't play. There's the emotional component that comes with it, the self-belief that corrodes. And the one challenge in this context was the fact that this was the tournament that they had to perform well at. The whole year, if they withdrew from events and tournaments, it would be okay. But this one, it wasn't the case. This is where the big endorsements happen, where the big sponsorships happen, where the big bonuses happen, and it was the US Open. A couple of weeks before the event, I met up with the player in New York, and we really kind of looked at what he was struggling with, the particular injury and the particular set that accompanied that injury, and it didn't really make sense to me. I didn't have the skill set. I didn't have the ability to manage this. In fact, most people didn't have the skill set. No one could work out what it was, and there was this idea that he may have to withdraw from the tournament, and that would be my career pretty much in the bag, or it I'd be redirecting my focus and my efforts from a career perspective. And what happened was I just got to this opportunity where he said, look, if you don't make it happen, you don't make it work, we're not going to continue. And I had a week to research and find answers and find solutions, which I did. I spent a lot of time in different medical libraries. It was quite early. We didn't have Google in those days, and finding solutions. And fortunately, I was able to find an answer to the problem he was confronted with. And the outcome was very positive. It turned out to be his best career result at the US Open. But in the process, his coach was watching how events unfolded. Here, I was confronted with this seemingly impossible situation. It caused me tremendous stress. I hadn't slept for weeks trying to find solutions and fearing that I would be losing my job and fearing that my whole career in sport would be jeopardized because it's so reputationally based. And he saw how it unfolded and how I kind of channeled the stress and the energy into something constructive and was able to find solutions and find ideas that were able to facilitate and help him overcome the challenge, but not only that, also augment and support his performance to some of the greatest heights that he'd experienced. And several years later, this coach, this incredible coach, one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with, got the position as the Olympic coach for the Chinese Olympic Federation. And he said that one of his predetermining or prerequisite requests to the Chinese Olympic Federation was that they go and recruit me. He wants me to be part of his team. And that was the turning point. And it was that wrestle with or grappling with the challenges and finding a way through and failing several times along the way. And just, I guess it's harnessing the adverse effects of stress and just really that persistence element that took me through and really changed the shape of my career indefinitely.
So Richard, what is driving you today?
So I'd say the bigger drivers in my life, I've got so many drivers. First of all, I have an absolute passion for what I do. I really enjoy being the best at what I can do, and certainly best I can do in my chosen area. I have a passion for learning, a passion for discovering, passion for solving problems. But it really kind of, I think the nucleus and the framework that all of this is built on and built around is the fact that I really enjoy helping people and helping them grow and overcome their challenges. And it's a very motivating thing and a very inspiring thing. And when you can tap into inspiration, I really believe that you can create remarkable outcomes.
Now, Richard, you are working with top athletes, with leaders around the world. Can you tell us, what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I think the future of leadership, it's a very unusual place. There's been a complete shift in expectations. I think the future of leadership is greater responsibility. And just to put it in context, if we look at the current set that leaders have to be engaged in and responsible for and aware of, leaders today have to weigh in on obviously business challenges and business events, political events, national challenges like COVID, employee health, diversity and inclusion, social justice, data protection, screening of fake news. That is one of the new portfolios that has emerged in recent years. And it's not a small percentage of employees that, or one's team that expect this. It's around 96%, according to the Edelman report that was published in 2020. At the same time, we're grappling with pessimism around the world. South Africa is particularly bad for a number of different reasons, but you're looking at almost 2/3 of the South African population are pessimistic about the future, and for good reason. All the events that have taken place over the many years, the fourth industrial revolution, superimposing COVID-19, our political instabilities of the past. So these are all challenges that have certainly manifested in pessimism. We know if you're looking at a sports team or a small group of individuals, if one person is pessimistic, it has this effect on the rest of the team, and we have to change this narrative, and that's part of a leader's portfolio. We also have this fractured psychological contract that has emerged. Here we've got the psychological contract that has existed for 80 years in the employment world, where businesses were expected or are expected to provide a fair compensation, a certain degree of security, job security, growth opportunities, make employees feel valued, rewarded, and supported, and build their self-worth and build fundamentally their brand. Each employee kind of builds their whole identity around the business, and that was one of the expectations that employees had of businesses. At the same time, businesses would expect loyalty and commitment and engagement. And what we're seeing now in this current socioeconomic climate is that we can't deliver on either side of this expectation of this contract. Businesses are struggling to pay employees. Forget about kind of growth in that space. In terms of growth opportunities, they're becoming less. There's a lot of stagnation in business at this point in time. In terms of people making their employees feel valued and rewarded, and making them feel that they're really part of something bigger, it's difficult when we're confronted with challenges, and we're struggling with our own issues, and we're struggling with crises after crises. We sometimes forget about the people around us, and we don't show them the appreciation and the value that is so important to them. And if you look at that kind of breakdown, not providing, making people feel appreciated, the growth opportunities, the bonuses are declining, and the rewards and the compensation packages are not as robust. And we see that as a consequence of the failure on business's part to provide certain securities, we've got less engagement, less loyalty, less commitment, and there's this degradation. So now what leaders have to do is acknowledge that this contract probably is not valid anymore, and we have to rewrite the script, and that's part of the new mandate. At the same time, leaders are expected to weigh in on chronic stress within the workforce. And if you take stats from, let's say, ProfMed within South Africa, you're looking at almost half your workforce is not coping with stress. And we know that stress has a tremendous impact on productivity and creativity and innovation. And then we've got this new set of demands that exists in the world of business right now, and that is leading through crisis. And so what leaders are going to have to, or are currently doing, is they're making decisions at the expense of precision. Just there's no time to think things through to the same degree, with the same degree of detail or level of detail. So the error rate's going to be slightly higher. They also have to rethink models all the time and adapt all the time. And a certain set of priorities have to be developed. You won't be able to tackle all the goals and aspirations, and you've got to amplify positivity, and the list goes on. So it's a tremendous set that leaders have to be responsible for. So I think that is the big challenge right now.
So Richard, looking back over your own journey, your own leadership journey, what would you say is most important? What do you consider most important for building future leaders?
I think that there's so many skills that are important. I think that decision making is important, implementation is important, organizational learning and change management and strategy and execution and negotiation. These are all fundamentals and will have to be grown and developed as the leader does in their journey, and their teams do. But from my lens, the skills that I believe will be extremely valuable within the current socioeconomic framework of those that are able to bring about the best in others and drive their performance. And I strongly believe that in terms of being able to augment this and deliver on this, the key determinant lies in neuroscience, understanding neurochemistry and behaviors. I think that's where we're going to be able to really leverage off in the future.
Now, Richard, when you speak to upcoming leaders, what is it you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
So this is an interesting thing, and I'm seeing it more and more. In recent months, I've been working with some brilliant CEOs with exceptional concepts, exceptional businesses. But the big challenge that most of them are experiencing is that very few people know and understand what they do. And also, one has to understand that even if they did know what their business does, most people only connect to people. They don't connect to a service, or they don't connect to a product. And you can see that within the context of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and list goes on, is that people understand Amazon, Jeff Bezos, Apple, Steve Jobs. We have these strong associations. And I do believe that there's an incredible place for social media in terms of creating that framework for the leader, the CEO, the executive team to become much more visible and create a face of the brand, of the business, and create an awareness. I think it's a very powerful leverage tool that hasn't been fully capitalized on in many sectors. And that has been a very recent experience.
Now, Richard, as a performance coach, and you touched on it already, what is your advice for future leaders when it comes to challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
Well, I think that, I think challenges, the biggest challenge in the future, I think that there's so many moving parts in society, the recalibration of work, skills instability. I think the way we're communicating, the way we're doing business, the speed at which this is all happening, the loneliness factor. I think there's so many moving parts here that the biggest challenge is going to be the ability to manage oneself and the ability to manage one's team. And I think if you can develop those skills, you're going to position yourself extremely well for the impending changes that are going to take place.
And Richard, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
Some of the new skills, I think that health is a predeterminant of success in many different ways. I think that if you look at a business from a practical, objective standpoint, what is a business? The business is people, the skills that they possess, and the time they're willing to invest, and the healthier they are, the more successful they're going to be in delivering this and building the whole business model and the framework. So I think that future leaders, I think that all the things that I've described and discussed, from the decision making and organizational learning and change management strategy, all valuable and can't be excluded. But I think the leverage point is going to be within the social context, understanding that people make the business, and nurturing and developing those relationships and your people is going to create a tremendous success leverage point. And I think that if leaders will understand the health continuum more effectively and more successfully, I think that they can create a far greater degree of organizational change and organizational growth.
Now, Richard, as a mentor to many leaders, many athletes, many future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
So there's one story that really just stands out. It was probably one of the most remarkable journeys that I've seen a person go on. And it happens to be an athlete, and it's a tennis player. I spent 2 decades in the world of tennis, so there's going to be a lot of references to tennis players. And a tennis player almost is like a micro enterprise. I mean, you think it's one player, but it's a very big team that rallies around and supports the individual. But this individual, what's interesting is I met him when I was very young. When I was very young, he was very young. He was a junior, and he wasn't particularly talented. He wasn't particularly athletic. And I was working with a lot of our top players in South Africa, and in fact, every single top player at the time in our country. We had a lot of representation on the tour at that time. It was early 2000s. And he was just one of these individuals who just, he showed persistence, he showed grit, despite the fact he wasn't very athletic, and he wasn't showing any major weapons or any great abilities. But I really believed in him, and I really supported the belief in self through this process. And what I used to do was leverage off my relationship with the other players and ask them as a favor, and I would be repaying the favor just to hit with him a little bit, bring him to training squad, bring him to training camps, and they did. They were very generous, but there was a group of players that wouldn't really engage with him. They didn't believe he was good enough to hit with, didn't believe that he had what it took to play, and he would bring their performance down. And there was a group, I didn't push the point, but there was another group that nurtured him and took him on board. And we had a great relation, great rapport. And the player grew and the player grew. Now, the interesting thing in this journey is that the group of players who wouldn't hit with him, who didn't believe that he was at their level, those individuals, there was 2 or 3, a handful of individuals, part of the squad, they were exceptionally talented, the most gifted players I've seen in the country as juniors, but they didn't amount to much as a professional. In fact, they didn't win a single professional match at an ATP level. I think they won a couple of futures matches. And if they reached a career ranking of 400, I think it was a lot. I don't even think they managed to get to that. You're kind of just creeping through on 1 or 2 wins here or there. So that was their career. But this particular individual who had the persistence, who had the self-belief, had the backing of myself and some of the other members of the team, he just grew and he grew, and every day it was about, I'm going to develop myself. What can I do better tomorrow? What did I do right today? How can I grow? How can I develop? How can I fix weaknesses? How can I develop strengths? And he went on and on in this journey, and it was a very powerful journey for me. And I just watched it and I supported, and I was always there. And eventually, the interesting thing about this player is he found his way into the top 20 in the world. So here, the player that no one would practice with ended up in the top 20, and the whole group of players that really believed that that he shouldn't share court space with them never amounted to anything. And he stayed there for a while. He was very consistent in the top 20 in the world. Great guy, great player. And then 1 year he developed a major setback. Injury setback was career limiting. But I've mentioned before in that previous story, in that an injury setback is a collection of different elements. There's a psychological element, there's a belief element that gets corroded. There's the questioning of, is this the end of the road? Was that a good run? And it's a very difficult place to come back from. And I had been involved, there's been a couple of setbacks along the way with this player, and really coached him in terms of bringing out the best in others. And now he was confronted with literally the fork in the road. If he gets this right, he's back in the game. If he doesn't get it right, he hasn't made enough money on the tour to kind of last the rest of his life. He hasn't done what he wants to do or aspired to do, or his aspirations haven't been met. And it would be a very disappointing end to a promising and difficult journey. And what the player did was he really got into this crisis situation, and instead of saying, why me, how me, and becoming resentful and bitter and angry, he basically said, I'm in control of my path. I'm in control of my destination. And I do understand that it's people around me that are going to make the difference, If I'm going to recover from this on an emotional, physical level, it's going to be the people I'm connected to that are going to support this and facilitate it. But I have to enable them. And from that moment, he took on a leadership role. So what he did with all the members of the team that started working with him, he gave them a tremendous amount of autonomy. He believed in them, said, look, this is what I need to achieve. It's the impossible. I do know that this is the timeline that I need to achieve it by. We're going to check in every week. We're going to be engaged in this process. But I want you to take on the responsibility. And I was part of that team. And at the same time, he offered tremendous support, and he encouraged mutual support amongst the group. So everyone was encouraging and supporting and really looking where they can add value in this recovery process, emotionally, physically, mentally, on every level. At the same time, there was this tremendous elements of respect that he showed for everyone. So he made them feel valued, and he made them feel like they were not a service provider to him. They were part of his journey back to success, and they were the missing piece of that journey back to success. And the last element that he did and performed exceptionally well was he made people feel appreciated. every time, I mean, there weren't major successes in the beginning of the recovery process, but after every treatment session with the physio, after every doctor's consult, he said, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your efforts. I really feel that I'm on the right track. And what happened was he brought out the best of people, and he had a great team, and he brought out the best in this team. And what happened was the most miraculous turnaround. Within 6 weeks, he was back on the tour. It was a completely unprecedented recovery. And what ended up is that this player turned out within a 12-month period, he ended up in the US Open final, and ended up a couple of months later in the Wimbledon final. And he ended up achieving a ranking of 5 in the world, making millions of dollars in incredible endorsements. And that was the defining moment for him. It was how he led his team to his recovery. And for me, that will always, always stick out, because when the chips were down, when the crisis really unfolded and everything was lost, he's the one who rose to the occasion. He's the one who created the change. And I'm really proud of him.
Thank you for sharing that. It's an incredible story, Richard. So it's all about keeping the energy high and making sure everybody is catching that that wave of energy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what he did so well. I think that we often assume that our success is driven by our own inputs and our own motivations and our own efforts. And the reality is that most of our success is driven by people around us. And we can nurture these relationships and create a bigger support infrastructure. We can grow, they can grow. Everyone really benefits from this collective elements. And he understood that. And it's very rare in an individual sport to see an individual know that there's a bigger picture, and that it's all about the group and it's all about the team, and you support the team. Ultimately, your success is completely built into that. And he did that well. I've been in other environments with exceptional individuals, leaders who didn't know how to support their team. And the shortcoming, the failure has not been with the team. The failure has been with the individual who hasn't achieved their aspirations or fell short of certain goals and expectations. And largely because of not nurturing and supporting these key relationships. And that was really a defining understanding.
Now, Richard, looking back over your own leadership journey, who are the kind of role models that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
So I think we've got so many role models, and I think in different areas. From a culture perspective, I think Oprah really stands out for me. She came from the rural South in the US. She overcame tremendous odds, race and gender, and tremendous sexual abuse. She had a belief in herself, and she had an aspiration. She wanted to be in show business, and she found a way to get there and break free from the restraints and pursue her ambition. But what was so interesting about her journey was the integrity at the time where she wanted to and the world that she wanted to get into. It was the era of the Jerry Springers and that kind of really kind of cheap, degrading shows, and she refused point blank to be part of that. And she was going to be different, despite the fact it was going to be a hard road. She made a promise to show respect to her audience, respect to her guests, and be free of exploitative topics. And really, she stuck to her guns, despite the fact that it would probably have been in her best interest to align herself in the short term to the narrative that was going on in the years that she evolved her career. But at the same time, not only did she show this incredible integrity and sticking to principles and values, she's made a tremendous contribution. I think the biggest and most recognized contribution is in her book club, and she promoted literacy. We know that education is transformative, and she also helped a lot of unknown authors become recognized for their work. And then there was that social commitment piece, through work with various charities. She's really uplifted the lives of millions and millions and millions of people and raised millions of dollars to do it. And it's not just the underprivileged in her immediate circle, but throughout the world, and we'd be beneficiaries of that. So we have the integrity, the contribution, the social commitment. But I think one of her most powerful features is the power of influence. And I think it was a Life magazine article that recognizes the most influential woman of her generation, and she inspired an entire generation of young women to pursue their dreams, and it was regardless of their circumstances, their ethnicity, their setbacks, their struggles. And I think just when you've got someone like Oprah, and I marvel at what, I love the story of overcoming adversity and creating those or taking those challenges and converting it into some sort of positive narrative and changing the lives of so many people. And the four things that she really imbues is integrity, contribution, social commitment, and influence. But that's on the cultural level. Then Einstein for me is I think one of the most powerful inspiration and leadership individuals. And the reason why is, again, we've got that tough start. So by the age of 3, Einstein is not saying a single word. He can't say a single word. He's considered to be mentally impaired, emotionally impaired. He doesn't develop friendships. He eventually learns how to speak, but he really struggles and develops certain compensatory strategies where you have to say sentences multiple times before he expresses it and practice them. And he was in a very isolated state. He was ostracized. He was persecuted for his differences. He didn't have an easy road, didn't have an easy life. And he wasn't this brilliant individual that everyone thinks he was in those formative years. Eventually, by the age of 15, he has to leave school. He's not good enough to be at school in many respects. And what we see is this transformation where he leaves school. He has this big build up, 15 years, really struggling in most respects. There are moments of brilliance. He becomes a brilliant musician along the way, and he shows an interest in science. And there's that big narrative about the compass and his curiosity with the compass. But by the age of 15, it's like everything was lost. That's an interesting story. And here you've got this guy who doesn't believe. He's got this powerful attitude. He's got this positive attitude, and all the failures and everything that's gone wrong up to this point means nothing. He still has these dreams. He still has these aspirations. And what we see is eventually Einstein gets put in the right environment, and we all of a sudden see this incredible person emerge. Who I think Time magazine cited Einstein as the person of the 20th century. I mean, that is how iconic he is. And also when he starts, he goes on the journey, he becomes this brilliant scientist. He sees things that other people don't see. His theories were ignored. So now he puts out all these incredible theories, and everyone shuns them and believes that they're not valid and not good. But he perseveres. And for me, the key messages in Einstein's journey is, again, overcoming adversity, the power of thought. He had this incredible imagination, questioned everything. He found new ways of thinking about old problems. He really matched it with an incredible work ethic. He was just completely unrelenting in his work ethic. And then he had this attitude of positivity despite adversity, despite challenges. And I think the set really resonates a lot with me, and I think we can draw a lot from it. And if we go into the social context, from another leader perspective, I think very few people are equal to Nelson Mandela. I think his whole theme and his whole life's work and mission was equality. And he turned out to be one of the great transformative civil rights leaders of our time. And Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, and Nelson Mandela are the three powerhouses who've changed society. And his whole life philosophy, he had this deep commitment to improving the lives of his people and applying the same message of freedom and equality to all the nations of the world. And there was a tremendous degree of self-sacrifice that went with it. And I think few leaders in history have given more of themselves to a cause than Nelson Mandela. And that's a great message. And if we combine these three narratives, the work of Oprah and the work of Nelson Mandela and Einstein, you put that together, that is the ultimate leadership model. And if we can kind of study that and learn from that and apply that to our lives, I think it would be an amazing journey for us.
Well, that's truly powerful, Richard. I hope to read more about it in your next book. So tell us, how can our listeners get hold of you, and where should they follow you?
So you can. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a little bit new to LinkedIn, so I've still got to develop the profile. But LinkedIn's a great place to start in terms of getting in touch. You can go to my website. Again, it's a little bit outdated, but it's a great place to contact me. Instagram's another platform that I use. So I think that's probably the best channel in terms of contacting me.
And Richard, last but not least, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own life?
I think that we're living in a very complex and rapidly changing world. And what's going to really be the differentiator is our ability to adapt emotionally, physically, and mentally. And that basically is what resilience is all about. So I think resilience is really important at this point in time. Now, there's been a tremendous insights and understanding and research into what is resilience. If we want to be resilient, we want to adapt successfully, we want to be mentally stronger, how do we go about developing this fundamental trait? And the two biggest insights and the two most valuable insights in terms of resilience and development came from elite military units around the world, looking at how do these individuals handle the complexity, the demands, the deprivation and food and sleep, and come out through these traumatic experiences. They come out and they're okay, and they get on with life, and they're functional, and they can go in again and again and again. And what makes them so effective? The other big insight came from winning Olympic athletes. And there's a vast difference between someone who holds a gold medal after living in this world for 25 years. There's a big difference between a gold medalist and someone who competes. Very big difference. And I'm going to expound a little bit if I have a couple of moments. So a couple of years ago, there was a research symposium. Basically, 9 institutions around the world came together from 3 continents specifically, looking at resilience in elite military units, what creates resilience in these individuals. And they shared all their findings over multiple decades of research. Now, it was previously believed that it's all about mindset. These guys are strong mentally, and they can handle these high physical and high emotional demanding situations. And when the research teams came together, they said, yes, like we understand resilience, there's a psychological component, but we didn't understand it correctly, because what we're seeing is there's multi-layers in resilience. There's physiological states, there's genetic contributions, there's life experiences, there's mentors, there's a lot of factors in resilience. There's even gender affects resilience. But the single most influential factor in resilience, the ability to successfully adapt to a changing environment, the ability to stand up after being knocked down, the ability to take setback after setback, the Albert Einstein model, the defining characteristic in resilience in what they found and what they saw was not psychological, it was physical. The fits of the candidates were, the individuals were, the healthier they were, the more resilient they were. And that's a powerful message. And there was just paper after paper saying it's the physical characteristics underpin the psychological elements. So that's a powerful message. What we're saying now is if we want to be more successful as leaders, if we want to be more successful as parents, if we want to be more successful in life, the life that is changing at exponential speeds, if we look after our health and strengthen our health and well-being, we will automatically be more resilient. That's a given. Now, we've got a very interesting shift now when we go to the Olympic athletes. Now, what you're looking at is every athlete is healthy and they look after their physical state and they train hard and they do everything right all the time. But only a handful of individuals hold that gold medal. They stand on that podium. Now, it was previously believed that it's ability. Why they stand on that gold medal is because they're just better than everyone else. So there was a big research team from the UK, and they looked at 12 athletes over several decades, looking at these champions, these people that did what everyone else wanted to do over their careers. Now, a career starts at 6 years old. It is a career that is marred by failures, loneliness, setbacks, injuries, financial pressure. A top Olympic athlete will earn $1,600 a month if you're with the US team. If you're with other teams around the world, you don't earn anything near that. And then you get to that pinnacle point where you compete in that Olympics, probably one event, a 2-week event in your entire life that you've worked for. And if you don't do well at that event, it's over. That whole journey, that 20-year commitment's gone. So these researchers are trying to understand and unpack what is it? What is it that makes this exceptional person? And what they identified wasn't ability. And I can testify to that. I've seen brilliant athletes never amount to much. I've seen average athletes hold gold medals. How? How is that possible? And as they started unpacking and exploring all the details, they realized that there's 5 consistent psychological traits. These guys possessed 5 elements, 4 of which are defining. So these resilient individuals have a very strong behavioral mindset where they're extremely motivated. Now, we get into a situation, a difficult situation in life, and sometimes we're motivated by, we've got to get out of this, our financial well-being, our business is at threat. We're driven by fear, or we're driven by the shame and the rejection or the punishment of not doing well, or the pain of the experience. So it motivates us, and we push and we push and we push. And the interesting thing about the study in resilience on these Olympic medalists, these gold medalists that have done what everyone else has tried to do but couldn't, is that they're motivated, but they're not motivated by these negatives. They're not motivated by fear, not motivated by rejection or punishment or pain. They're motivated by passion for what they do, being the best. They're motivated by hope and aspiration and pleasure. That is what motivates them. Now, the interesting thing about that motivational set is that motivational set causes and creates and evolves into inspiration. And when we're inspired, we can achieve anything. The previous set, it's motivation. It gets transient, it doesn't last forever. So that's something we can all learn in this resilience model. Where is our motivation? Where does it come from? How can we nurture? What do we want for this journey of life? Find that motivation, find that inspiration, change your destiny. At the same time, what this research paper found was that these individuals are very focused, incredibly focused. We all know, anyone who's looked at a Maria Sharapova, a former client of mine, or Serena Williams, and you've seen that intensity on the court. Now, the interesting thing in the study was that we understand that focus, but these individuals, when they experience setbacks and failures and disappointments, they start focusing on the goal being to win the Olympic medal, and they start focusing on their process. So what happens when you're focusing on the goal, we start looking at what other people are doing. Why are they doing well and I'm injured and not doing well? Why are they being successful and I'm trying equally as hard but not getting there? Why I'm focused on achieving this, but I can't get there. This is the goal. What they start doing is they start recalibrating their whole mindset and whole behavioral state, where they focus on the process. What did I do today that will improve me for tomorrow? What did I do right today that will guarantee success in the future? What can I improve today? And if one step at a time, focus on process, focus on process, focus on process. The other thing they do is also remove themselves periodically from the environment. So often when we get into a crisis in a business, we get into a crisis in a personal situation, it's all about the crisis until the crisis has passed. What these individuals do is that there's this intensity in managing the crisis, but at the same time, they remove themselves to create this breathing space to see more clearly. They create objectivity. The moments in a day, or moments in a week, or moments in a month. So they have these unfocused opportunities. Great lesson for us. We also picked up in the study was this confidence element. Now, confidence stems from success. The more successful you are, the more confident you can be, and you are, and that exudes from you. Now, here's the crazy thing is that in a period of challenge and struggle, your confidence declines. So where we're holding right now, many of our lives have been negatively impacted by all the shifts and changes that have taken place. And we're not feeling that confidence. We're not feeling secure in our abilities and in our decisions. So how did these champions, these individuals in these difficult situations overcome that and regain their confidence? What these researchers found was this incredible phenomenon is that these guys go back in their past. So when they're struggling with the current situation, they go back and they remind themselves of what they've achieved, how they've done it. So a good example is looking at the transition when Nelson Mandela became the president. We had this struggle and the pain in the country, and we're able to overcome it. And we really did what no other country was able to achieve. That is a tremendous milestone, a tremendous accomplishment, which means that anything that we do in the future, we can be successful at because we have done the impossible in the past. And that's what these individuals do. And that's what a lot of successful teams do is they go back and say, when were we successful? How are we feeling? What was our experience? The other thing is they also realize that their confidence is completely built on their relationships to others. So often we honestly believe that our confidence is completely self-motivated, self-driven, self-encapsulated. The reality is our confidence stems from the people around us, reminding of us where our talents are, also checking in and being critical of us when we're not doing a great job. And that's honesty and that dialogue and that dynamic that I believe is so important. And this is a lesson that we can learn from them. And the final big psychological message that really underpins resilience and our ability to be successful no matter what's going on is the support factor. Every single one of these 12 Olympic champions who over multiple decades compete in multiple Olympics, what they believed was it was their team, it was their connection, it was the engagement, it was the sharing of experiences, it was the triumphs, the tragedies, the pain, the successes. It was that collective support that was instrumental in overcoming the obstacles. And I think that's where we have to look. What's so difficult about our time is this disconnect, the remote working conditions. We don't have the instrumental support, the mentorship, the guidance, the care, the emotional support. All these things are lacking. We have to overcome this, and we have to get this connection stronger and reinforced. And I think that if we can drive these elements, we can be extremely resilient as a person, as a team, as a business. Great lessons. And that's what I'd like to really leave you with in this interview.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and reminding us it is how we support our team that determines our success so many times.
Exactly.
Richard, thank you.